The spring of 1834 rolled into the hills of Harlan County, Kentucky, with a strange hush, like the world was holding its breath. Folks said the wind smelled different that year, sweet with dogwood blossoms but heavy, too, like rain that wouldn't fall. The crops seemed slower to wake, and the birds sang less at dawn. It was in this uneasy season that the twins were born. They came into the world under a blood moon, in a cabin on the edge of the Pine Mountain forest. Their mother, Mercy Hollis, gave birth alone, save for her husband Samuel and the town's midwife, who had nearly turned back after her horse panicked 3 miles up the ridge. The labor was long and brutal, and when it was over, silence filled the room. 2 baby boys lay swaddled in the same patchwork blanket. But they didn't cry. They blinked up at the midwife with wide, unnerving eyes. Pale blue, so pale they seemed silver. The midwife crossed herself and whispered, "God help them both." From the very beginning, Caleb and Elijah Hollis were different. They never spoke a word until they were 4, but they communicated with each other in a language no one else understood. Guttural hums. Chirping sounds. Silent gestures. They moved in perfect symmetry, as though tethered by an invisible thread. If Caleb fell and scraped his knee, Elijah limped too. When Elijah had the fever, Caleb writhed and sweat through his sheets, though he was healthy by all other accounts. They would draw the same shapes in the dirt without looking at each other's work, always circles within circles, always facing east. The town whispered. "Witch-born," said some. "Cursed," said others. But Mercy, with the patient strength only a mother knows, refused to believe her boys were evil. "They're just connected," she'd say, brushing Caleb's hair as Elijah mirrored the movement on himself. As the boys grew, their strangeness deepened, but so did their kindness. They would sneak food to hungry neighbors during the harsh winters. They nursed injured birds back to health and buried dead ones with tiny wooden crosses. They shared everything, even dreams, it seemed. More than once, Mercy would wake to find them standing in the woods behind the house in the dead of night, whispering to something she couldn't see. By the time they were 12, the twins had gained an eerie reputation. They could sense danger before it happened. Once, they pulled a child out of the river 5 minutes before the dam upstream broke and washed through town. Another time, they stopped a wagon driver just before a tree snapped and crushed his path. They never wanted thanks. "Something told us," Elijah would say, and Caleb would nod, that something remained undefined, until the day of the fire. It started in the east fields, where the drought had turned crops into tinder. A spark from a thresher ignited a blaze that roared faster than any man could outrun. The smoke rose like a black serpent into the sky. Panic erupted. Children screamed. Livestock bolted through fences. The townsfolk scrambled to save what they could, but the fire was heading toward the schoolhouse. Dozens of children were trapped, including the mayor's own daughter. And that was when the twins acted. Caleb and Elijah sprinted toward the flames as everyone else ran from them. Their mother screamed for them to stop, but they didn't hesitate. They vanished into the smoke. No one knows exactly how they did it, but minutes later, the schoolhouse doors burst open and one by one, the children poured out, coughing, crying, but alive. All except the twins. When the fire was finally extinguished, their charred bodies were found near the back wall of the schoolhouse, huddled together. Caleb's arms wrapped around Elijah, as if protecting him even in death. The town mourned as if they'd lost saints. But that should have been the end of the story. Except, it wasn't. 2 nights after the funeral, Mercy woke to the sound of soft singing. The lullaby she used to hum when the boys were babies. But her husband was asleep beside her. The house was still. Yet the song floated through the was tender low. She followed the sound out into the woods behind the house. And there they were. The twins stood barefoot in the grass, silver-eyed and glowing faintly in the moonlight, as if made of stardust and smoke. They didn't speak. They just looked at her, and smiled. Then, they vanished. For weeks afterward, others reported seeing the twins, guiding lost hikers, calming panicked animals, whispering warnings to those in danger. A boy fell into a well and swore he felt hands pushing him up before anyone arrived. A blind woman said she felt two warm presences take her hand and lead her safely across a washed-out bridge. Word spread. Soon, people from neighboring counties began to arrive, drawn by tales of the ghost twins of Harlan. Some came out of curiosity. Others out of desperation, hoping the boys might help find a missing loved one or offer comfort in their grief. And sometimes, they did. No one ever captured them on paper or photograph. No scientific test could explain the phenomena. But their presence was real, felt like wind, warm as breath, unmistakable. One bitter winter night, a wagon overturned in the snow. A woman and her newborn were trapped beneath the wreck. Rescuers arrived hours later, but found both alive and unharmed. The woman, shivering, pointed toward the hills and whispered, "Two boys kept us warm, wrapped us in light." Samuel Hollis, once a skeptic, began leaving a lantern on the porch each night. "In case the boys come by," he'd say. And sometimes the lantern would flicker, though no wind blew. Years passed. Mercy grew old. But she never left the cabin. "I still feel them," she'd say to visitors. "Their hearts, they're still here." One summer, a young doctor from Boston came to investigate. Driven by logic and science, he interviewed dozens, combed through records, even exhumed the twins' graves under court order. They were empty. The doctor left Kentucky a changed man. He never published his findings. But in a letter to a friend, he wrote, "There are things in this world that logic cannot cage. I met love so powerful it defied death, connection so deep it rewrote nature." The Hollis twins were not ghosts. They were a miracle. In time, the town stopped questioning. They simply accepted. The old schoolhouse was rebuilt and named Hollis Hall, etched with the words, "For those who give without asking, who protect without praise." To this day, locals say that when danger stirs in the hills, before the storm hits or the rockslide begins, you might see two silhouettes standing just beyond the trees. Watching. Waiting. And if you ever feel a gentle hand on your shoulder in the middle of the woods or a soft lullaby in the wind, don't be afraid. It's just Caleb and Elijah. Still walking the ridge between this world and whatever lies beyond. Still reminding us that the greatest mysteries aren't meant to be solved, but felt. Still teaching us that compassion, real compassion, the kind that risks everything for someone else, is the most powerful force in the universe. And sometimes, not even death can dim its light.